Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Mom Talk Sex podcast with me, your host, More Yelvington of More Transform Your Reality, where I help you step out of trauma and reclaim your power. I am so honored to have the beautiful Kelly here with me today. Hey, Kelly.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you for being here because you have the most amazing story and energy. I've got to experience you a little bit in the background, and it's been such a pleasure. And I just know that this conversation is going to be such an eye-opener for so many of our listeners. So let's just dive in. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Awesome. Thank you so much, More. And thank you to everyone that's listening right now. Um, yeah, my name is Kelly Rattanee. I am a mother of two. I'm a sensual alchemist, an intimacy activator, a master healer, and I'm a former sex worker. And really, my work and my life has been this unfurling and knowing and relearning and unknowing and reclaiming the parts of myself that I didn't quite understand, didn't quite honor, like my sexuality, my voice, trauma, and how does that all play into the woman that I am now, the mother that I am, the way that I engage with myself sexually, the way I engage with men sexually. So yes, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And yes, you have such a beautiful energy, and what a great service. Like, what a great thing to be giving to women and any men that are listening too, right? Gentlemen, if you are listening, hats off to you on taking the lead and ensuring that you understand the possibilities of what the mother of your children are going through or what women are going through, your wife. So yes, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you for being here. And it's so true. I think the minute we really tune into what it is that's blocking us and stopping us and preventing us from receiving, I think so much of what we go through as adults, as people, is learning to receive, receiving us, receiving our bodies, receiving from others. And it's been this like learning process of receiving. So maybe we can dive a little bit about your story and you can share a little bit about what you went through and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, certainly. So I was 16. So I'm just to give context, I'm 41 years old now, and I was trafficked into sex work at the age of 16. And just to clarify, there's a lot of stereotypes around being trafficked and so on and so forth. And like clearly, I'm a Caucasian woman. I grew up in the upper middle class, so it's not always this like dire situation from developing nations and so on and so forth, and sadly this can happen in your own backyard to someone that you know. And so I just want to kind of get rid of the stigma that it's always this, like the woman is a junkie, she's this, she's this, she's this. It's not always the case. And so I was trafficked into the sex trade at the age of 16, and of course it was terrifying. Like it was terrifying. You're 16 years old. My only sexual experience up until that point was being raped at the age of 15 years old by a boy that was my best friend. And so it didn't sort of lay, now knowing what we know about trauma, it laid the foundation for how I viewed myself in relationship to the male sex, right? That I was something to be consumed, that I was something to be taken when desired, right? That there was no need to have a conversation about it. It's like, okay, that's what you wanted, that's what you got, okay, and that's that. And I think like so many of us, when you were born, in the same decades, just yesterday, there wasn't a conversation, like no one was, there was no such thing as hashtag me too. There was no such thing as like education for girls around their bodies and boys around consent and respect. Like the word consent didn't even exist. Like I mean, it existed obviously in the English language and other languages across the planet, but for us, it didn't exist. And it goes even to, not to go down an entirely different path, but even growing up and being told that you have to eat what's on your plate and you have to
Right.
finish it all, even though maybe in that moment you're not hungry, even though you're full, even though you really, every time you take a bite of that broccoli, because like let's be real, when you're a child, broccoli is like the worst possible experience you could ever hope for. Do you know what I mean? But and you gag and you don't want to eat it and you're like sniveling and crying at the table and everyone's like, no, just suck it up and eat it. And it's not, look, don't raise entitled children that are so spoiled, but when you're looking at your own childhood, it is worth having a peek at things that your voice didn't matter, right? And it's not because your parents were assholes, unless they were, but everyone was doing what was part of their programming, right? And
Right.
chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you are having some sort of awakening or inclination that you no longer want to follow the herd. You don't want to, no disrespect to your mothers and fathers or whoever brought you up, but you don't necessarily want to follow the same patterns that they did. That's why you're listening here. So
Right.
it was terrifying. Like, being raped is a horrendous thing. Obviously, it's particularly when it's someone that like, and trust, and that trust is removed. And I generally had a sense of just, I would almost call it like self-loathing that I picked up from my mother growing up. I watched my mother be very critical of herself. My parents, bless their souls, they're beautiful people in their own rights. They didn't show a lot of affection and love in our household. We had by the outside looking in, we had a beautiful life. We lived in the suburbs. We played bocce in our backyard. We traveled to Europe, like all the things that North American families are supposed to do. We go to Disneyland, blah, 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 blah. And so the the disconnect, though, between like intimacy within my parents' marriage, right? And intimacy isn't always about sex, right? Intimacy is
Right.
a deep reverence for self in order to revere another person, and that's reciprocal. And a lack of healthy communication. There was a lot of silent treatment in my home. There was a lot of yelling in my home. There was a lot of like narcissistic patterning in my home. And so when you think about sex work, generally the concept is that the girl doesn't have any money, and so she goes into sex work. So we can look at, when there's lack in any area, it opens the door to seek it from somewhere else, right? So
Right.
for me, it was seeking love, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was seeking someone who saw me, someone who accepted me, someone who built me up. And so, long and short, I met this man, and he was 5 years older than me, and he had ran great game, great at what he did. And actually, in truth, in terms of pimps, he actually turned out to be a great guy. He taught me a lot of stuff about myself. He really kept me safe. I was never allowed to drink. I was never allowed to do drugs, which really saved my life when I look at it now. And but you can imagine that, when you're in that sort of container, and there's always this exchange between money and your body, it really develops a lot of tracks that lead to not very great places, right? Like the
Right.
concept that you're only worthy if there's money involved, you're only worthy in short stints. And this can actually show up too for women. And again, this isn't a judgment. Like, nothing I'm about to say is because I'm judging your personal sexual preferences or behavior, but this can also show up like in an energetic pattern for women that have experienced a lot of one night stands, right?
Mhm.
Because it's short intimacy, it's short bursts. There's no real connection there. You might think there is, right? Because chemistry is a beautiful thing, but it's a bit of a bitch, because it
Right.
it tricks you into thinking that you're being accepted. It tricks you into feeling loved. It gives those still happy feelings, but the reality is it fizzles out. So I had to, so 10 years goes by, and this is my life. And as I got older, it became my normal, right? So it wasn't scary anymore. As I got older, it wasn't scary anymore. And I actually started to really pick up patterns in the men that were coming to see me. What were they seeking? What were they looking for? Because ultimately, as a sex worker, you have a lot of time on your hands. You have a lot of time to think. You have a lot of time to hear people, because, contrary to popular belief, like, men don't just go to sex workers for only sex. Like, they go there for hugs, they go there to talk. You guys have probably seen it if you're active on social media. There was a meme going around for the longest time about the gym. It's probably going around right now because it's like the new year, new me, situation. And it
Right.
was along the lines like, going to the treadmill or going to the gym to walk on a treadmill is like going to a hooker for sex or for a hug. And I was like, but people do go to hookers for hugs. And side note, I got so good at talking to these men and kind of coaching them through what they were going through, from everything from career stuff to marital stuff to fears around the death of their parents to whatever it was, their own health, that I got the nickname in the brothel that I was working at towards when I was about 24 years old, called the hugging hooker. Because, this is maybe a bit rude, but everyone hold on to their panties and your pearls. But in these spaces, the walls are just slapped up. They're not insulated. So you can
Right.
often hear what's going on in your girlfriend. Like, you all work together, you're all comfortable together, whatever. And you can hear what's happening in the next room. And you could always tell when a girl was trying to rush somebody out, because all of a sudden she would turn on like what we would call like the porn star effect, right? Uh, right. And it's all put on exactly like that.
Yep.
And but then all of a sudden my room started to get really quiet. And people were like, the girls were like, "What are you doing in there?" I'm like, "Well, he just wanted to talk." And they were like, "About what?" And it was like, "Well, all kinds of things." So I began, in that career, it started off being something that it was really, really scary. And then at some point in time, I had to make a decision if I was just going to remain scared for however long. I had no idea how long I was going to be there. I didn't know what that looked like. Or if there was a way that I could turn this into something that is going to at least feel somewhat remarkable,
Yeah.
right? So that I think all of us have a desire. And I mean, part of that is why you become mothers, right? There is a internal desire to leave a legacy, right? And
Right.
legacy might look like you write a book. The legacy might look like you are Martin Luther King or Amelia Earhart. Like that might be that is a legacy. But the legacy is also the love that your children show to other people because of the love that you share to them. Like that is also a legacy.
Right.
And so I I didn't know that I would ever be a mother. I didn't know what my life would look like, but I did have this deep desire to leave a legacy. And so I started to just listen to my body, and I started to really actually listen to the men. I hate to say this, but for a long time I wasn't listening to anything that they said. I was like, how much do you pay me? What do you want? What time is it? Okay, let's go.
Right.
And but then I started to be like, well, you know what? They're here anyway. I'm here. I might as well make the most of it. And I did. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what men want that goes beyond the obvious, right? Like everyone's like, oh, men only want sex. And it's not true. It's not. Do you know what I mean? They don't. Sex is a beautiful, integral part of life, but it's not the only thing that they're seeking when they're seeking to like plug in. And I learned a lot about the condition of loneliness, like what that does to somebody, what it does to the way that they see themselves, how they show up as men. Um, and I learned a lot about our capacity as women to really truly hold like an unexhaustible amount of love and space for somebody,
Yeah.
and I think that's hugely overlooked when we're talking about women and when we're talking about motherhood, because all we ever hear when we talk about women and motherhood is burnout. Oh,
Right.
you must be so tired. It's so exhausting, particularly, and this is a big broad blanket statement, but particularly in North American culture. Right.
Right.
I've had the privilege of living in Thailand for the last 10 years. I'm originally from Canada. I have the immense privilege and pleasure of working with women and men from all over the world, different cultures, different religions, different concepts of relationships. And what I can say in general about the North American view of woman and mother is that it's deeply underrepresented. It's not honored at all. It's brushed aside. Like we've allowed equality versus equity to run the show. And so now when we have been convinced so deeply that we are equal to men, we have lost touch with that which is important and true about ourselves. And like the truth is, and I get it, ladies that are listening who are exhausted right now, who have a child stuck to their face or their breast, or they're sitting on the toilet with a child on their lap. Like I too have two children. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And like I appreciate all of the exhaustion. I appreciate the throw up, the poopy diapers, the ever ending being touched to the point where you're like, if one more person touches me, I'm going to pull my hair out of my head. Like, I appreciate that. And I now can see that like we just have this ability to regenerate ourselves over and over and over, but we're not taught that and we're not told that. It's much easier to keep us from joy and all of those things if we're told that we're exhausted all the time.
Right.
So it
I
was really,
totally agree.
yeah, it was a beautiful, although scary, and certainly lots of healing had to come afterwards and continue, right? Like healing everyone is not a finish line. There is no,
Right.
you're not gonna cross the finish line and be like, "Phew, healed. Thank God. Okay, let's carry
I
on."
wish I wish it was like that.
Yeah,
Like,
but I mean, then we would have nothing to talk about. Oh my God, what would we all talk
um,
about? Get to the finish line. And it's like, okay, well, okay, see you. Like, take good, like now what? Now what? Right. So yeah,
yeah.
it's really fascinating.
So what do men want? I love you were like, I know. I'm like, okay, share with us what men want.
Yeah. So men, and we all of us want to feel valued. Um, but
Yeah.
men almost need to feel it more, right? Because especially once you become a mother, you're immediately valued, right? Someone immediately needs you. Like that baby needs you from the onset, right? And men, it's not the same, to be honest with you. Like it's not. They're in that capacity. They're not eaten the same way. So it creates this kind of like internal need for validation. And I know there's a lot of talk in the self-development world, like that's the world we're both in,
Yeah.
about like, oh, you shouldn't seek validation from others. And it's, yeah, it's correct. You shouldn't seek it, but it's always nice when you get it,
Right.
right? Like it's always nice when you get it. And when I look now, now being back in my parents' home for a visit is a bit wild. And when I go to, couples, if I'm able to visit a couple in their home, I always kind of witness how they are together. And one of the things that men really want is for you just to listen. You don't need to multitask when your husband or your boyfriend or your father's talking to you. Just sit and listen. They don't need an answer from you. They're not looking for advice. They're just looking for someone to hold that space, right? And I know a lot of you are like, "Oh, I do listen," and it's like, mm, I'm just gonna challenge that. Are you really listening, or are you listening and then listening for the dryer at the same time? Are you listening, or are you thinking about your to-do list? Because the way that you listen to a man, and I don't mean some arrogant asshole who's like mansplaining you about everything. Like I don't mean you have to sit and tolerate rude conversation. Like you're allowed to like ideally you're not married to someone like that. And if you are, then we should talk and we can course correct that. But like
Right.
you don't have to tolerate shit. Like that's I don't mean that,
Right.
but it's like if your husband walks through the door, there's that saying like aren't you a sight for sore eyes? And if you really break that down, like I as a man, I am weary. Like masculine energy is very direct and it's very linear and it is exhausting. Like we all know that.
Yeah.
All know that because when you get into your masculine as a woman, what are you? You're fucking exhausted, right?
Mhm.
And that's the to-do list, the tasks things, the practical things. And men operate in that more often than not. And so
Right.
like can't we let them be exhausted? Like we're allowed to be exhausted and we're allowed to bitch and moan about being exhausted, but if they start doing it, we're like, ooh, ooh, right? And this is not an unkindness. Like being a woman is exhausting. Being a mother is exhausting. And we can choose to continue with that path, or we can choose to say, you know what? I have this amazing ability to give birth to a child and then to recover miraculously, only to be able to possibly do it all over again, or adopt
Right.
children and care for them like they're my own. Like, what? You have such a great capacity for love. Are you insane that you're exhausted? All you have to do is like cycle that. So men want to be
Right.
listened to. They want to be respected, right? So, and some of you can kind of witness this in your own relationships, in your own dialogue. If your husband, or I'm just going to say husband because it's easier than saying partner,
Yeah. Yeah.
boyfriend, blah, 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 common law, like we're going with husband, okay? If
Yeah.
your husband says something, maybe he's like, oh, well, okay, you're driving, right? You're driving a car, he's driving, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna park here. And you're like, oh, but there's a parking space over there, like as if he's an idiot. Like, don't who cares? He's made a decision. Let him park where he wants to park, just like you wouldn't want to be questioned about your decisions. He doesn't want to be questioned about his. And that's a very simple example. But when we do these kinds of things in one area of our life, we do them everywhere, right? There's that saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So now let's go back to the conversation part where your husband wants to be heard. He wants to be listened to. Now, let's say you're listening to him, but then in the back of your head, you're like, oh, did I send in the kids' permission slip forms for blah, 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 blah? Chances are, when you are making love to this man, your brain is also going to go somewhere else. And where your brain
Right.
goes, your body goes. And they can feel that,
Yeah.
right? It's just like, you know when someone's paying attention. Most of you have children. You know when you are talking to your child and they are staring at you with this like blank look on their face, that they are
Right.
thinking about their iPad, they're thinking about Paw Patrol or Coco Melon or Baby Shark, any of the other number of things that make you want to pull your eyeballs out of your head and stuff them in your ears, right? Like I said, with a lot of love. So men want to be listened to and genuinely listened to. They want to be respected, right? If they say something, they want you to respect that, obviously within reason. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And they
Yes.
also want to please you. They want so badly to worship you. They want to kiss you everywhere and lick you everywhere and hold you and smell you. And they want to make you come more than once. And and we get really stingy with ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because when we can't receive and we can't understand how important that is for them, then we shut ourselves down.
Right.
And let's be real, like as women, it is often much easier to do something for other people than it is to do for ourselves. So if you are a woman that is having a hard time receiving affection, love, worship, orgasms, and if it's so challenging to imagine doing it for yourself, put put it into perspective. Do it for him. Let that be the catalyst, right? Do it for him. Let that be the catalyst. And then I can assure you, once you get a taste of how nice that feels, to see him light up because you're able to receive him, then it becomes a game changer. And then it's much easier for you to claim that bit for yourself if it's too hard to start just for you.
Yeah, I love that. So what do you think, why do you think men go to like a brothel?
Well, a number of reasons. And, the most obvious one is sex, but it's always more than sex, right? Sex isn't just because then technically you could just watch porn and masturbate.
Right.
I mean, it's free, it's convenient, it's at home, blah, 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 blah. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to get your car, drive, you don't have to pay for it. You don't have to park your car. You don't have to be embarrassed to ask for it. It's
Right.
just, on your little thingy bobbies, whatever, whatever, whatever. You get onto OnlyFans, you call it a day. um, what they're really looking for is connection, right?
Yeah.
They're looking to feel connected to somebody. And I want you to like hold on to that word to feel, right? Because physical connection and actual energetic connection are not the same thing, right? Like when you are not energetically, emotionally connected to someone, it's kind of like masturbating with a body, right? You're going
Right.
through the motions. It feels good. You can feel their touch, like da 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 da. But if the touch is a dead touch, right? If the eye contact is non-existent, if the moans and groans are orchestrated, then which we're all very good at. Don't pretend that you're
Yeah.
not. We've all done it. Like this, we better hurry up here. I'm tired. You guys remember that episode? I don't know if any of you watched Sex in the City. Most likely you did.
I
But
love Sex and the City.
yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So there is a scene with Miranda and Steve. Miranda is the
Yep.
lawyer, right? Very in her masculine, burnt out, exhausted, and they haven't been intimate. Like I think they're married now. Maybe their son is already born or something like this, and they haven't been intimate forever. And they go out, they have a couple of drinks, and then they're back in bed and they're doing it. And she looks at the clock. Like, ladies, how many of you have to like? I mean, if you had a watch on, some of you are wearing Apple watches when you're making love. Take that off right now. It
Yeah.
doesn't count as steps. Stop it. It's not. Don't count your calories with steps. Don't worry about it. So, she looks at the clock on the bedside table and she's like, "Can we just get this over with? I'm tired." And it's like,
Oh,
ugh, right? So when a man Like imagine hearing that, like what that does to your ego, what that does to your self-esteem, what that does to your self-worth. Like I, in the history of histories, have never ever heard a man say to me, "Can we just get this over with? I'm tired." Like, but we maybe we all haven't been, but you more maybe have been with a man who has erectile dysfunction disorder, who he maybe he's drank too much, he can't get hard, he can't keep hard, and like, what does that do for you as a woman?
Right.
Right? That sucks. You're like, oh my God, is my pussy not tight? I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that. Sorry. Like, is this not okay? Did I do this wrong? Like, it gets in your head. So now imagine men hear this probably 3 or 4 times a week from their wives or partners. No, I'm not
Wow.
in the mood. No, I'm too tired. No, no, no. And you look at like there's studies done. I mean, you're most of your mothers, so probably you want to be, a mother that is doing the best, right? So you've looked at some things, and there's all kinds of studies done about the word no and how like word no is very important first and foremost. This is a word that women need to understand, but when you say it to a child, right? No, 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 no. I don't remember what the number is. Someone can Google it or ask ChatGTP or any number of sources. Like the average number of no is astonishing for a child. And now the average number for a no for a man trying to be intimate with his wife is also really astonishing. It is on
Wow.
average 3 to 5 times per week, right? Like what? Like
Wow.
wild, right? So they're looking for connection. They are looking to explore something, right? Like I've had, I would say, you know, all my clients were men. Probably 98% of them are married. And I know that makes me very unpopular. And I'm just going to ask you to get over it. And I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do about it. And if they were married, and after I'd seen people a couple of times, because they'll come back to see you. Do you know what I mean? They're not building like a relationship with you. It's a friendship with some benefits for both people, right? I get paid, they get laid, everyone's happy, la la la. They go back to their wives a better person, to be honest with you. Less resentful, less bitter, more able to be present. Sad and ashamed, but at least more able to be present. So
Yeah.
when a man comes and we start a conversation like, are you married? Yes, I'm married. And then I would always ask, because I'm rude or curious, I would say, then why are you here? Because I really wanted to know. I was like, well, why are you here then if you're married? Because in my mind, you have to think like, I was a child when I entered, 16 years old, you're a child. You still
Right.
believe that marriage is two people falling so madly in love with each other, and then they just love each other forever and ever and ever, and then that's it. So then when men would come to see me and they were married, I'd be like, I'd be like, well, why are you here? Like, you're married. This is the greatest thing that's ever happened in the history of great things. You had a party, there was a dress, there was a cake. And if you're an Indian
Right.
family, there was 5 days of parties. Do you know what I mean? And endless outfits. And you were bedazzled. Like, why are you here? What could you possibly want from me if you already have it at home?
Right.
And the the broad generalization of it was around this. My wife gained 8 pounds, 12 kilos, 20 pounds, 30 kilos, and she thinks that she is not attractive. And so her behavior changed towards me. She doesn't want me to touch her. She doesn't dress the same way anymore. She turns off all the lights when she gets undressed. I can't join her in the shower anymore, right? Or my wife had a baby and she thinks her body is ruined. And so her behavior has changed towards me. And I would always ask, again, because I'm either rude or I'm curious, I would say, well, is that true? Do you think that? Do you think that she's unattractive? And never, I want you to hear this, ladies. I have probably spent time with over 10,000 men, not just as a sex worker, but now as a coach also.
Yeah.
That never in the history of evers did I ever hear a man say, no, I think my wife is ugly. Never. After the birth of a
Mhm.
child, no, she's so much more beautiful now. She gave birth to my children. She's like God. She's a goddess.
Wow.
She's so beautiful. Her glow when she's holding my babies. Like I love her so much. Like I can almost cry. But we've got it in our head our culture has dishonored motherhood to the point where no wonder why people aren't having babies anymore.
Right.
Like we've dishonored motherhood to the point where all we see after we give birth is not the beautiful change and the evolution of who we are as women, but it's this deep resentment that we are no longer that which we used to be.
Right.
Right now, our boobs are, look, I breastfed 2 kids. Like our boobs are this is this, our pussy looks like this. And I will tell you right now, I've never ever had a man say to me, oh, like my wife's pussy looks like she just gave birth. Not ever. Not ever. Because they're not looking at you the same way you're looking at yourself.
Right.
Right? Like you'd have to be a pretty big asshole not to honor the woman who birthed your children. I mean, they exist.
They do.
So it's the perception of yourself is far more important than the way that anyone else perceives you. Because once it's like that, with one bad apple, it rottens the whole bunch, right? So if you have this untrue perception that you became a mother, therefore you're not sexy, that untrue perception is going to bleed into everything in your life.
Right.
Right? The way that you care for yourself, the way that you laugh, the way that you find joy, the way that you dress, right? Everything. And it's not your fault. Like this isn't your fault. This is a collection of the garbage that we've been fed. However,
Right. And the belief systems.
that's exactly it. That you as a woman are supposed to be this way. And we still
Right.
see it. So you just have to, let's just like, if not engaging, not engaging.
Yes.
So in the
Return
same,
to sender.
that's exactly it. And it's the same with when women, your body changes. It would be super weird if your body didn't change. It'd be so weird if your body didn't change. Like how weird would that be if you became a mother, whether it was through natural birth, adoption, or surrogacy? Like you are now in full responsibility mode to this other living thing that will die if you do not take care of it.
Yes, I will.
And so everything about you changes. Everything. And that's a beautiful thing. Right? So allow that change to be, and the best verse that I could say is like be at peace with it.
Yeah.
You don't have to love it right away. Like you don't have to love it right away. Love and peace are not the same thing, but be at peace with it. And then the other thing around gaining weight, like I never ever had a man say, "Oh my goodness, my wife gained weight and she's so disgusting." Like, but you say that to yourself because
All the time.
interestingly enough, when I came out of the sex work, the job that I went into after a slight hiatus of having to go to copious amounts of counseling was personal training. So now all my clients are female. Most of them are mothers. I heard roughly this sentence from every single mother that walked into my office for a consultation. I had a baby and now my body is either ruined or disgusting. I don't like this about myself. And they would grab on, they grab onto it like it's something that you like, it's like a thing. I
Yeah.
hate this. I hate this part of life. So I heard those words more often than not. It was actually one of the reasons why I left personal training and went into coaching. Right. So the way that we perceive ourselves is going to change our behavior. And that's what these men were witnessing. Right. Some men would come to me and and this is what it's like. Like, I mean, most of you maybe haven't been in a brothel. And if you have, cool, we should definitely sit down and have coffee because we probably have some stories to share. But what it is you walk, generally they're upstairs for safety reasons. So you walk into a building and you walk up a set of stairs and you open this like ominous door. It's like black. It's like an exit sign. It's very like dark and dingy. And then you walk in and it's like walking into fucking Candyland. Do you know what I mean? Like for me anyway, I worked in a high-end brothel because I was sober, I was clean, I was smart, I was attractive. Do you know what I mean? There's various different types. I'll give you the nice, pretty version of it. So you walk in and it's like rich colors everywhere and like velvet everything and chandeliers and candles and music and fucking blah 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 blah. Do you know what I mean? It's like walking into Las Vegas, right? The,
Yeah.
the nice part of the strip, not the
Right.
the
Not the dingy part.
yeah, like the nice part, the part where like where like the nice hotels are, and the people that still look like they haven't been there for 45 years because they made one bad bet. So
Right.
It's the nice part of Las Vegas. And so everything is perfectly orchestrated for pleasure and relaxation. Everything. Music, the color scheme, the textures, so on and so forth. Now, every man has to go in there for the first time at some point in time. None of them really want to be there, to be honest with you. None of them really want to be there. So they come in, they're kind of sheepish, they're sort of ashamed. They get seated like by a hostess, like in a waiting room. And then the girls come in and introduce themselves one by one. And they're so nervous, right? Because there's so much shame around it. There's so much shame around desire, right? Really,
Yeah.
even for men. And then there's double the amount of shame if you're a married man, because it's
Right.
like, I shouldn't be here. I don't really want to be here. And some of them will even say that to you. So they choose you based on whatever reason, based on your hair color, your what you said, whatever. So now you escort them down a long hallway flanked with rooms, and you go into the room that they have that is available, or it's your specific room. You pour them a drink, you sit down with them, you talk to them. What are they doing? What do they want? La la la, why are they here? And the men that are married that don't really want to be there, they will tell you that. And they'll be like this. And they'll be looking at their drink, whatever it is, like rum and coke or something. And they'll be like, well, I'm married. And they'll never look at you. Like they'll be talking into this like void of coke and rum. I'm married. And then there's always this like long pause. And you just have to sit and wait for it because you know what he's going to say. I don't want to be here, but I don't want to be here, but my wife and I haven't had sex for insert a period of time. I had one man who came to me, he and his wife, it was his first time coming. And you can always tell some guys are bullshit. They're like, I've never been to a place like this before. And it's like, interesting because you know where to put your coat and you seem to be very comfortable like that, So like, when someone is bullshitting you, do you know what I mean? But
Right.
some of them, they're so ashamed. And you can tell that this has been something that they battled with like 100 times. Probably they've driven by the brothel like 28 times in the course of a year. They've thought about it. Sometimes maybe they've even parked their car, then they back out, like all kinds of things. So my wife and I haven't had sex for 11 years. That's the longest I ever heard, 11 years.
Wow.
And feel like you could feel the pain in his voice when he would say it. And and then the way that you view that man is very, very different than you view like the drug dealer or the mafioso that comes in because he's just there because he doesn't have time to have a relationship. He doesn't give a fuck. He just wants someone who's not going to rat him out to the cops. Do you know what I mean? So that's a different scenario. But for
Right.
men like we'll call him Bob. For men like Bob, and it can be 11 years, it can be 3 months, it can be whatever. There's no appropriate amount of time that says, okay, now you can go seek some sex somewhere else.
Right.
Every person, much like you all, every person has a different threshold of ability to withstand pain, whether that's physical, emotional, energetic, for a period of time, right? So, if for a man, if sex is high on his list of importance, he might only be able to tolerate like 3 months or 6 weeks. It does not make him a bad man versus the man who's went 11 years, right? Like
Right.
no one is better than the other in terms of morality, right? So when these men would come and the shame that they would feel, and then they carry that shame around with them, right? And we know that shame does awful, awful things to us,
Yeah.
right? So they begin, questioning themselves and then they're questioning everything. And it's like all any of us want, man, woman, whatever, is to feel loved, to know that we matter, to know that we're important to the person who said that we were important, and to be treated accordingly, right?
That
So
is so true. And I
yeah,
love that you say that because it's so important. And so now, fast forward, this is what you do. You work with women, you work with men, you're coach. So if our listeners want to find you, where can they find you?
Instagram is the best place to find me. I'm really, really active on Instagram. My website at the moment is under construction, but possibly by the time this is all put out into the world, it will be finished. So I'll make sure that you have that and it can go in the show notes. But Instagram is the best place to find me. I'm super active on Instagram. I call it the Saturday night slash Sunday morning because depending on where you are in the world, it's going to hit you on Saturday
Right.
night or Sunday morning. And it's called my Saturday night, Sunday morning sex show. And it's an opportunity for people to send me a DM with a question around sex. So it can be anything. It can be like, what's the best lube to use? How do I use a condom? Okay, every time I'm in this position, this hurts. What can I do? Like whatever it is. Even how to respond to an unpleasant sexual experience. So you can send me a DM and I will answer it on the show. You will remain anonymous. I'm not going to be like, oh, Suzanne from Connecticut. Here you are, Suzanne, come on camera. Let's talk about your sex life. So you can send me a question and I will always answer it on the show. And so
Oh, I
that's a good
love
way for
that.
people to kind of get a feel for my voice. Yeah, I'm super active on Instagram. And also, I mean, you're also welcome to come and visit me anywhere that I might be in the world and experience my work in person. And I also work with people online. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun what I do.
You are so fun. Well, thank you so much for being here, for all your insight, because I feel like it was so incredible and really eye-opening. And I loved how you put what the men actually, how they view the women and how the women, how we view us, and putting that together in those words, I think was really eye-opening for a lot of our listeners. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being in this conversation with me. It was amazing and I enjoyed every moment of it. So I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank
And
you so
thank
much
you for
for having me.
and thank you guys for listening. And we will tune in with you again next week. Have a wonderful rest of your week, you guys. Bye.